You know, I feel like tier lists are like the equivalent of internet junk food. And hey, I'm not complaining. I love watching them. Today, I'll be ranking every anime I've ever watched. And before you take out your death notes and start writing a symphony with my name plastered all on it, let's just get this out of the way. These are just my opinions. This is entirely subjective. I can guarantee you're not going to agree with me on some stuff. Point is, don't take this too seriously, okay? I'm just a dude sharing his thoughts on the internet. Now, I think there are a few disclaimers we should clarify before we get started. Firstly, I'm only talking about anime that I've actually completed, or at least finished a season of. For example, you won't see me reviewing the Pokemon anime here, even though I've watched heaps of episodes sporadically on free-to-air TV. Reviewing that would feel disingenuous to me. Secondly, I think it's important that we clarify what these tiers mean. So at the very top, S tier means masterpiece. Doesn't mean perfect, just means that I really loved it. A tier means it was great. B tier means that it was good, and C tier means that it was okay. D tier doesn't necessarily mean I hate it, but I did not like it. Thirdly, this will be mostly spoiler free. If I'm gonna touch on spoilers, it'll be very mild because I don't want to compromise any of these shows or movies for you. So you can rest easy on that. Lastly, I really love anime, but I have not seen anywhere near as much as some people online. I'm what people would consider a filthy casual. And with all that said and done, let's get straight into it. Here is my list. Told you it wasn't very long. Man, that background is so boring. Come on. Okay, we'll stick with this. This will be fine. Starting up first, we have Delicious in Dungeon. It is both as charming as it is bombastically fun. The fantasy world that it creates, while kind of simplistic at first, really grafts itself into the conversation as one of the greats. It's a wildly fun romp that isn't afraid to switch itself up fluidly between, say, drama and comedy. Seriously, I can't wait for season 2. It's A tier. Spy Family. What happens when you have an elite spy, a secret assassin, a telepathic child, and a seer that happens to be a dog create a family? Well, you get Spy Family. The concept alone is brilliant. As far as easy to watch comedies go, this one is easily near the top of the list for me. This isn't really a critique, but I kind of find it strange that the show feels so kid-friendly in season 1, but then season 2 gets a fair bit darker. I mean, hey, I don't mind. I still really liked it. Just kind of confused me a bit. A tier. You know, I've seen a lot of Dragon Ball sporadically, and I know the story of Z pretty well from all the Budokai games that I played growing up as a kid, and I've also watched a lot of Super's big fights on YouTube. But for the sake of keeping this list condensed, let's just talk about Dragon Ball Super's Broly movie. Dragon Ball Z Broly is pure testosterone. My wife absolutely hated this thing, and I just sat there giggling like a small child watching it. Look, is it a good idea to make your whole movie basically one elongated fight with the protagonist and antagonist screaming and beaming each other the whole time? Me, probably not. But did I personally enjoy it? Absolutely. So for that reason alone, this thing is A tier. Man, 3 A tiers right off the bat. Things gonna get a bit more spicy now. Clannad, Clannad, Clannad. Look, I know this show is iconic, and I also know that it's necessary viewing for its successor, but I found it pretty dry. The stuff with Fuko-chan dragged out significantly. And in this season, the cast of characters weren't bad, just none of them really stood out to me. C tier. However, Clannad After Story is a completely different beast. There was a string of episodes that literally moved me to tears one after the other. The first half of the show is a little bit meh, but the second half is genuinely spectacular. Also, just personally, being a parent genuinely transformed my viewing experience of this. Man, this show, oh my gosh. I genuinely love this show. It would get S tier. It's just that I really think it fumbled the ending. A tier. Now, speaking of moving animes, A Silent Voice. A Silent Voice is a rather phenomenal exploration of a rather unworn path. Many shows or movies that depict bullying have a rather one-dimensional view of it. A lot of our media shows the consequences of bullying to the victims, which is good, but not many highlight the complexity of bullying, the social outcasting, the social anxiety, and the depression that come along with it. Nothing does it quite like A Silent Voice. Is it a phenomenal movie? Yes. Is it potentially overrated? Maybe, but I still think it deserves its spot at the top. For me, it's S tier. I just put A Silent Voice above Clannad After Stories. People are gonna have my head. Many of us avid anime fans have an anime that got us into anime, or an anime that we watched while we were growing up. For me, that was Naruto. Naruto is objectively not great. Even ignoring all the filler, it's repetitive and bloated. But in saying this, I still thought it created a really interesting world, and I really enjoyed the power systems that it made. Not to mention that the final confrontation between Naruto and Sasuke has been rewatched by yours truly dozens of times on YouTube. It's pretty sweet, but it's C tier. Naruto's successor, Shippuden, struggles with many of the same things, but I think it just does it all a bit better. It is a more robust narrative, a handful of tear-jerking moments, and bigger stakes. However, the sheer volume of episodes is a huge barrier to entry. And granted, it really does lose itself in its power scaling around the end, trading kunai with planetary devastation. Yeah, you heard that. But I'm a bit of a sucker for that sort of thing. Not to mention that the dynamic between Sasuke and Naruto works surprisingly well for me. And to top it all off, this show actually has a decent ending. B tier. Now, there is a surprising amount of Naruto movies, and I've watched a handful of them, but we'll stick to the canon ones. First, Naruto the Last. This movie is the definition of a mixed bag to me. Coming off the back of Shippuden, this is the moment when the enemies in the show become so astronomically big, it becomes intangible. That Otsuki came from the moon. It kind of made me wonder how we could ever recapture that magical feeling of the original Naruto. There were some cool moments, but it's C tier. It's not for me. Now, I've watched snippets of Boruto online. You know, the classic watch a few big fights and battles on YouTube sort of thing. For the most part, the characters and direction of the show just don't resonate with me personally like the OG Naruto did. Clearly, this just isn't made for me. However, the movie summarizing the first few arcs of the Boruto show was absolutely made for me. I watched this film in theaters when it first released with like no expectations, and I was absolutely floored by it. The action choreography in this is like absolutely bonkers. Seeing a full-powered Naruto and Sasuke teaming up was like amazing. It made me giggle like a preschooler. As a complete package, as a one-off movie, this is the most succinct and well put together Naruto I think has ever been. For me personally, it's A tier. Also, if you ever want to actually watch Naruto, do yourself a favor and skip the filler and watch what's called the Ocean Cut. You'll have to look into it online, but if you really want to take the plunge into Naruto, I think it will make your experience so much better. Next. Now, in my experience, anime movies are oftentimes grossly overrated, but The Girl Who Leapt Through Time isn't one of them. Some people say this movie is kind of boring, and I can genuinely see where they're coming from. The start of this film is definitely a slow burn, but as far as one-off anime movies go, this is one of the best. Awesome visuals, a compelling story, a whimsical aura, and a rather moving message make this a really compelling movie to watch. It's A tier. Now, speaking of overrated, I watched Penguin Highway when it first released. It boasts some pretty impressive visuals, but aside from that, I don't think this movie has really any substance at all. The characters are irritating, the narrative has no real payoff, it's just genuinely forgettable. D tier. ReZero. As far as isekais go, I genuinely think ReZero is the best. It's been a long while now since I watched it, and I'm waiting for season 3 to drop before I jump into season 2. But from what I can remember, this show is as soul-crushing as it is enthralling. The mysteries that layer this show are done masterfully, and I don't want to give anything away. You should definitely watch it if you can. It's S tier. When I was a young adult, I decided to chuck on Netflix and see what anime they had, and at the time, not too much, but they did have Fairy Tail. It's a bit of a turn your brain off kind of show that ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. It has charm, it has action, and it has a bit too much fan service for my liking. It's C tier. Now we approach a collection of movies from the esteemed Makoto Shinkai. Up first, we have his latest film, Suzume. I saw this movie in theaters and I wasn't wowed. I liked it, but didn't love it. But after a second viewing at home, I kind of changed my mind. I think this movie is actually pretty great. I was originally put off by the ending. You see, it seems a little bit convoluted if you ask me, but if you can look past that, I think you can have a really great time with this film. It is visually phenomenal and the music is iconic. Not to mention, the characters are actually surprisingly grounded. In its simplest form, this is just a fantastic road trip movie. A tier. Now we get to Weathering with You. I have opinions on this movie. Opinions I'm sure are gonna rile some feathers. Sorry in advance. I think Weathering with You sucks. I don't like the characters. I thought their motivations were nonsensical. Specific narrative decisions at the climax of this film, particularly revolving around a boy holding a gun and doing stuff with it, left me laughing in the cinemas for all the wrong reasons. This movie is visually flawless, but that doesn't matter when all the other elements fall so flat. It's kind of one of those movies that you walk out of, and the moment you start thinking about the plot too much, you start to pull apart all of these little plot holes so quickly. Trust me, I really wanted to love this movie, but this movie left me feeling confused and frankly disappointed. I think it's D tier. However, Your Name is Makoto Shinkai's magnum opus. I think this is the best anime movie ever made. It's accessible to newcomers, it's visually impressive, its narrative is compelling and shrouded in Japanese myth. Whenever I try to get people to try out anime, this is always the top of my list. Whether people like anime or not, they genuinely seem to like this film. And I think that's because Your Name is a genuine masterpiece. It's absolutely S tier. Now, hot off the heels of watching Your Name, I jumped into 2 more films, 5 meters per second and Children Who Chase Lost Voices. Both are highly regarded online and both left me feeling kind of confused and bored. Both looked full of potential, but just didn't really go anywhere. D tier. Now, My Hero Academia came out at just the right time for me. You see, I was totally engrossed in the MCU at the time, and My Hero Academia seems to just kind of recapture some of that magic for me. The show starts off incredibly strong, but then kind of feels like it has a bit of an identity crisis around midway through. I'm still yet to catch up completely, but I can safely say that it offers a lot of value. B tier. Hunter x Hunter. It's arguably one of the best shows out there. It literally exudes quality. However, the Chimera Ant arc, while being the high point of the series, has a myriad of pacing problems. Still, in terms of shonen, Hunter x Hunter is a really great all-rounder. You should definitely check it out. It's A tier. Vinland Saga. Oh, Vinland Saga, my beloved. The story covers a young man named Thorfinn and his quest for vengeance. It's a deeply mature show that doesn't hold back any punches. The show is not for the faint of heart, but it genuinely moved me and touched me in a way you can only dream of art doing. I am so grateful that I've seen this show. It's absolutely S tier. Now here's one that I bet literally no one saw coming. I was kind of tossing up if I should even put it on this list, but I thought it was kind of fun and interesting. Final Fantasy 15 Brotherhood. You know, Final Fantasy 15 had a rather convoluted advertisement campaign leading up to the game's release. And wouldn't you know, they released a CGI movie and an anime in tandem with the game, which I gobbled up really quick. The Final Fantasy 15 anime is a fun romp. It's nothing sophisticated, but it was fun nonetheless. I got to see these characters in action in a different format, and I liked that. I think they're a great band of friends. Nonetheless, I absolutely cannot argue this show is C tier. This reminds me, you know what we need? We need a Final Fantasy 7 anime. That would be peak. I mean, Advent Children's good, but we need an anime. Nomura-san, please. All right, we gotta make this fast. Let's do a triple speed round. I'm pretty sure you said this is Mabarushi, but I'm sorry if I butcher that. We're gonna go with Mabarushi. Mabarushi? It's a Netflix original film with stunning visuals, but is otherwise completely forgettable to me. C tier. I Want to Eat Your Pancreas is another movie, and it has a fair bit of charm and heart to it. Albeit, it is a bit odd, and that title is a pretty big barrier to entry. Nonetheless, this movie absolutely hit me in the feels, and it has a rather outlandish twist. If you get the time, it's kind of worth a watch. I think it's B tier. Makia When the Promised Flower Blooms. Makia When the Promised Flower Blooms is a rather interesting fantasy movie. It was actually a pretty alright time, even if it did drag on a little bit. Is it as good as everyone says it is? I'm not sure. I think it's a bit overrated. B tier. Moving back onto shows, Apothecary Diaries. Apothecary Diaries? Apothecary Diary.
It's Apothecary Diaries Yubaka Gaijin.
It's kind of hard to put into words what makes this show so phenomenal. It has a diverse and interesting cast of characters. It has a wittiness and cleverness to its writing. It has a Sherlock Holmes-esque vibe, which I'm always down with. It's visually dazzling and it has elements of romance, drama, and comedy. As a show, it's incredibly robust. It's hard to say whether it's A tier or S tier. I'm just gonna go A tier. Next, I put together a group of 4 shows, which we will call the Edge Collection. You know, shows where they talk like this, and I can't believe we understand each other. I know every next move he has. I've already won. Up first, we have the King of Edge, Death Note. From the very moment the first episode's credits rolled, I knew exactly what I had found. It was unashamedly, unequivocally the edgiest edgelord nonsense I'd ever had the privilege of consuming. In all seriousness, this show is genuinely pretty fantastic. The characterization of the protagonist and antagonist can often be reduced to them playing like 4D chess with each other, making wild assumptions on random happenstances, but I don't really care. This show is fun. It's a roller coaster ride that kept me gripped for almost all of it. I mean, who doesn't enjoy watching a psychopath bloom? Do I think the show spun its wheels a bit after a big event mid-season? Absolutely. Even still, I think it's A tier. All right, straight off the bat, this next anime is just S tier, all right? Attack on Titan might have a polarizing ending, but the rest of the show is inexplicitly good. I genuinely don't have another anime to compare it to. It shaves off so much fluff and noise that you typically see in anime and just goes all in on the narrative, the characters, and action. Look, I've already spoken a lot about Attack on Titan. I've made 2 videos on that show already that you're free to check out if you want to hear my opinion more. All you need to know is that regardless of the ending, this show is peak. It's probably my favorite show. It's S tier. Now, we have the modern day anime poster child, Jujutsu Kaisen. I am just gonna come out and say it. I don't think there's an action anime more relentlessly entertaining than Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. That was like, what was that? That was insane. I don't have like words to describe what I saw. The power system can be a bit cumbersome to understand, but the animation and characters are iconic. If you can bear the shonen tropes, the edginess, and that white-haired lady's brief but incredible moment of lunacy.
What are you doing? Making a mistake. Making a mistake.
I think you'll have an alright time. Nothing has put me on the edge of my seat and got my blood pressure up like watching Jujutsu Kaisen. It's... I think it's S tier. Next up, we have Solo Leveling, an anime that has a novel concept, but its power creep is incredibly fast. If you like video games, then you're very likely going to enjoy this anime, as it incorporates gaming language and cliches into its core concepts. In my opinion, it lacks the substance to truly soar, but it does bring together 2 things that I rather like, anime and video games, with an intensity that's totally my vibe. I'm gonna go with A tier. All right, we are getting there. We are over halfway. Next up, we have Demon Slayer. Honestly, this is like my guilty pleasure show. I'm not here for a gripping story. I'm not here for compelling characters. I'm just here to watch people with swords duke it out with demons. And my gosh, is this a visual feast for the eyeballs. It's spectacle over substance. In summary, it's a time. It's very pretty, it's very fun, and that's about it. B tier. What happens if you gave Patara earrings to Harry Potter and One Punch Man? I imagine it's something like Mashal. Mashal is a fantasy comedy that is unapologetically absurd and isn't afraid to hide that it's kind of just ripping off Harry Potter, which is fine with me. I like Harry Potter, I like cream puffs, I like Mashal. B tier. In order to try and get some culture, I got around to watching a rather older anime, Haruhi Suzume. It seems to be a lot of people's first anime online and pioneered a lot of tropes that we commonly see in anime today, specifically like slice of life stuff. I actually ended up watching like the side show of it, The Disappearance of Nagoya, I don't know. This one. I watched that one first by accident and I was big time confused. I eventually got onto the actual canon show and I gotta say, it's alright. It didn't blow me away, but then again, slice of lives aren't really my jam anyway. It had some interesting concepts, but I think comparing it to more modern titles, it's a bit more inept in its execution. And don't get me started on Endless 8. C tier. Now we're gonna move on to the Ghibli block. I've seen a total of 6 Ghibli films. If you want my thoughts in more depth, then you can check out this video that I made too. It's titled, What I Wish I Knew Before Watching Anime. I'm super proud of this video that I made. I mean, just look at that thumbnail. Mwah, chef's kiss. Essentially, just understand that Ghibli leans into a very particular style of storytelling that isn't as commonly seen in Western animation, and thus I'm not gonna jive with it as much as some other people might. I don't want to undermine the genius and impact that Ghibli has had on the medium. Now, with all that said, let's do this. Tales of Earthsea. This movie was a slog. I really don't remember anything about it. It's D tier. Spirited Away. It's a cultural classic and it's extremely well regarded online. I recognize that many people enjoy extrapolating the deeper meaning found in this film. I definitely appreciate the animation, but I didn't find the characters or narrative particularly compelling. For me, Spirited Away is C tier. Howl's Moving Castle. It's a genuinely fun romp. It's solely interested in showcasing a very interesting fantasy world and giving you the means to be immersed in it. It drags sometimes, but it's actually one of my favorite Ghibli films I've seen. I think it's B tier. Princess Mononoke. Oh boy. This film is also really well regarded, but for me, it just didn't land at all. I really enjoyed watching the protagonist navigate the politics of the world. However, I personally felt like the conclusion leaned way too heavy into the supernatural, kind of undermining the story. Not to mention, the pacing felt really off. Perhaps a rewatch now with a few more animes under my belt would change my perspective, but for now, for what I can remember, it's C tier. My Neighbor Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro shares a lot of the shortcomings that I found with Spirited Away. The mundane moments didn't really do much for me, and just when the movie really started to take off and do something, it ended. It's C tier. Now, Grave of the Fireflies is completely different. It's heartwarming and heartbreaking. The moments of brevity found in this film work way more than any other Ghibli film for me because the narrative and characters are way more compelling to me. Perhaps that's just due to my interest in the subject matter. It follows a young boy and his little sister as they struggle to survive in Japan during World War II. As far as the small assortment of Ghibli films I've watched goes, this one is cream of the crop, the best there is. It doesn't try and do more than just tell a coherent and grounded story, and for that, I commend it. It's S tier. All right, we finished up with Ghibli. Leave a comment and let me know how you feel about it. I'm ready. Next up, we have Fruit Basket. Now, Fruit Basket. Fruit Basket's lead, Toru Honda, is just pure optimism. This show explores the Chinese zodiac in a rather comedic and compelling way. Whilst the show coasts for a long time doing the routine slice of life thing, for some reason, this slice of life really worked for me. Not to mention the final season definitely picked up. By the end, I really enjoyed the character work in this show. Not to mention the comedy actually surprisingly hit for me. This show nails a nostalgic warmth for me. It's kind of hard to describe. Okay, this is like the third time my camera battery has just died, so, oh my gosh. And my son just threw up on me. So I think I gotta change this outfit. All right. Let's get back to it, hey? Where were we? Oh yeah, Fruit Basket. It seemed to conjure up feelings of youth, like I was right back in high school. And for that very sole reason alone, it's rather special to me. It's S tier. Violet Evergarden. You know, it was only a few months ago that I scrolled and selected this show on a whim. I had literally no idea what to expect. In fact, a friend of mine told me that the show was garbage. They'd only watched the movie out of context. And man, am I so glad that I watched this show. Firstly, Violet Evergarden's animation is jaw-dropping, like literally flawless. Its narrative, at times simple, but I found it to be deeply profound. It felt like an expose on the human experience, a dissection of what it means to feel. Both my wife and I found ourselves crying our eyes out on multiple occasions. This show, unequivocally, S tier. Speaking of brilliant visuals, Oshinoko. Oshinoko is an idol anime. It explores the life of a pop star and her children. There's a few really strange, tropey things in this show that you've kind of got to buy into to enjoy it, but if you're willing to do that like I was, then I think you can have a really, really great time. It's a strong A tier. And now, up next, we have the one, the only. When you think of OG 00's anime, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very likely going to come up at some point. As a show, it's entertaining, but I don't recall it having as much substance. As a child, there literally isn't anything cooler than slapping on a jewel disc on your arm and ruining your friend's day with your 3 Egyptian god cards that you happen to pick up by going to Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, The Pyramid of Light, as a 7-year-old. But objectively, the show isn't that awesome. C tier. This next show is a really interesting one, actually. I've never really done this with a show before. You know when you discover a show and it's such good quality that you just literally don't want it to end? And so then you decide not to watch it for a while? I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but that happened to me with Assassination Classroom. I literally delayed finishing this show so I could elongate my enjoyment of it. It's kind of strange. It's just a genuinely great show. It's got heart, it's got action, it's got a spot on this list. A tier. All right, we're almost finished. Flavors of Youth. I don't really want to linger on this one. It feels like it was trying to be arty, but in the process of taking its time through a collection of smaller stories, the message it wanted to convey was lost on me. It just didn't really do anything for me. I found it kind of boring. Sorry, Flavors of Youth apologists. I think it's D tier. Now, for the final movie on this list, Summer Wars. I think it's an alright time. I remember some kind of cool action moments and a little bit of family bonding, but other than that, I can't really recall all that much about this movie. So because I can't really remember it that much, I guess I've got to go with C tier. Sword Art Online. You know, not as many shows showed as much promise as say something like Sword Art. It's a novel concept that was initially executed flawlessly. The first couple of episodes of Sword Art are genuinely incredible. Their world building, their characters, they set it up really well. But after a while, the show kind of starts spinning its wheels and then devolves into some rather strange and obscure territory. It's not often that something with such promise lets you down, but Sword Art did that for me. In the end, I still enjoyed it, but my goodness, I could have loved this show. I hear the sequel, Alicization, I butchered that, but I hear it's better. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you watched it. As far as season 1 and 2 go, I'm gonna say it's B tier. You know, as you look at my list, you'll notice that all of my S tier shows have their flaws, but they share something in common. They're an expression of art that evokes a particular feeling in me. A feeling that's so strong that I couldn't help but be immersed in the world that they created. Frieren is much the same. We always idolize reaching our goals, facing our demons, conquering our mountains. But what happens when that is done? What happens when everything's accomplished? When you've climbed the mountain? That's something that I think Frieren unpacks rather well. The feeling it evokes to me is a feeling of family and loneliness. Not to mention it has great action sequences too. Look, I can see some people finding this show immensely boring, especially with it now holding the top spot on my anime list. People have wild expectations for this show. But if you can come at it with a fresh slate, I genuinely don't think you'll be disappointed. It's S tier. All right, and in the spirit of reviewing everything and being transparent, we have this thing. It's my 15-year-old dirty laundry. In case you didn't know, I'm a Christian, and right off the bat, if you're a Christian, yeah, just don't watch this one. The title gives it away. It's a show about a group of high schoolers who suddenly find themselves in a zombie apocalypse. The action is pretty sweet. The art is incredible, and the fan service is irrefutable. I had no idea how desensitized I was to the amount of lewdness in this show, until I showed my close friend the pilot episode and immediately felt that awkwardness infiltrate the room. You know what I mean? I liked it at the time, but people change. Now I can comfortably say it's just not for me. However, I can't deny that it's not poorly made. C tier. For any show or film I didn't like, don't worry about it. You're guaranteed to find a Reddit expose detailing how, say, Weathering with You is pure cinema. And if you're feeling up to it, I actually have this exact tier list down in the description. Why not fill it out and then send it to me on Twitter and I can see where you landed with all this stuff. It's my first time doing one of these tier lists, and I've learned from this experience that they are inherently reductive. They're often interpreted online as just boiling down nuance to S tier or bad, which is definitely not what I'm going for here. But in saying that, I had a lot of fun making this too. It's kind of cool to know there's going to be a video online that just kind of says all my thoughts on all the anime I've seen. Of course, feel free to roast me in the comments, and while you're at it, do you want to leave me some anime suggestions? I'm always open to it. Also, I'm sure no one's really watching this now, but I just want to say I'm super stoked. I've hit over 650 subscribers. That is really cool. I'm just like, I don't know. Thank you so much. Anyway, that's more than enough from me. Thanks for listening. You guys are awesome. Have a fantastic day. Bye.